So we think about the animal's body as like an entire unit, even if there are different things going on in different parts of it. The goal is not to play the conventional game and give a different supplement in lieu of a different drug for each individual problem. The goal is to kind of figure out what is the underlying process and what support does that need? What support does that organ system require so that healing can come about as a result of enabling detoxification and then strengthening the organs that require more support so that they also have an easier time doing their job.
Welcome back to the Crunchy Carnivore Podcast. I am Melissa Weidenhammer, natural rearing breeder and certified canine nutritionist, and I am here with my partner, Dr. Jessica Levy, holistic veterinarian. And today we want to really talk about the concept of what holistic really means in that we're healing the whole, which sounds very duh. Well, duh, we're healing the whole, it's holistic. But really breaking it down as to what that means. So we're actually going to do this in two parts. We're going to talk about main concepts and principles today. And then the second part, we're going to talk about really how to flesh it out and apply these things. So for today, basically we want to cover the concepts of how is looking at the animal as a whole different in concept from the conventional approach. And then why we believe that that is much more effective in long-term true healing for our animals and for people too, but we're talking about animals specifically. So when we look at kind of the first concept of treating the whole, we're looking at how the vast majority of disease or illness actually processes throughout the body. So that basically comes down to two basic factors pretty much all of the time. One is it's going to be the body is trying to detoxify the problem out, the virus, the bacteria, the toxins. It's getting the junk collected and pushing it out. That's one part. The other part that can be sometimes separately or in tandem is that the immune system itself is out of balance. And so when we want to think about that is what the body is trying to do. We're looking at it as a whole system that has a bunch of different mechanisms within one system that are trying to work together to right the ship. Whereas if we think about it more from the conventional standpoint as a biomechanical machine that is broken. And so when you're dealing with a problem, they're looking at it as this problem over here, this ear infection and this diarrhea and, this back pain or whatever it is as separate things that all need a separate drug or a separate medicine. Whereas when you're looking at it as a whole, you're taking all of what's going on into consideration because you're realizing that it's all one system that works together, not separate gears or separate compartments that you address separately.
Exactly. Your whole body functions as a unit all in one, and these processes that we can describe separately, so all the different ways that your body can detoxify, how the immune system works and what it tries to do to correct itself, but all these things are going on at the same time. And so instead of saying, well, for ear infections on the natural side, we use apple cider vinegar compared to whatever drug might be used, it's not about swapping. I love that term because it's not about instead of this drug, we're going to do this natural thing. We're viewing the symptoms like in the context of the whole body. And that gives you a totally different perspective on what is going on within your pet. We're not ignoring the symptoms. We're using the symptoms as a guide to tell us what is this process that is going on inside the animal. And so I think that's something that's also a little different from conventional medicine. Conventional medicine doesn't ask why. Why is this happening? Why is your body doing this? Why is your blood pressure high? Why are you having diarrhea? Or if they figured out why you're having diarrhea and given that another name, why do you have ulcerative colitis? Why do you have gallbladder disorders? And so we are trying to understand the whole body in a single context and figure out which process is being affected and really which organ systems require more support than others. So that's just another way to think about it. But I think like regardless of what's going on with your pet, if you kind of frame it in those terms and look at their bodies a little differently, it gives you a much better guide to what is the underlying disease and therefore what needs to be done to address that root cause.
And I think another really important concept through looking at when we're looking at treating the whole and how the vast majority of disease and illness is dealt with in the system naturally, the process of that, there are individualized pathways for that process to happen. And I did not understand what that meant when we first started talking about this. So this was just fascinating. And there was I had a light bulb moment with it. But you talk about having individualized, so from one animal to the next, they may detoxify. They have a path of least resistance was the term that you used that is, more used or common to that specific animal than maybe a different one. And so expand on that for everybody.
So if you think about what detoxification is, right, it's such a buzzword. Everybody wants to detox themselves or detox their pets or do a detox. So detoxification is the process of gathering up waste products, chemicals that your body can't metabolize, toxins that have been brought into the body, how to gather up all these things from inside your body and move them out. And so there's only so many holes in your body. There's only so many ways things can get from the inside to the outside. So you can poop things out, you can pee things out, things come out the pores of the skin, things come out the ears, very popular in lots of dogs, popular in small children. You can have bad breath, things are being pushed out through the lungs. So there's only so many holes in the system, but then each individual animal will have their path of removal that is the easiest for their body. So for example, if you have a dog whose gastrointestinal tract has never functioned well, the dog's not had a solid stool, it has trouble with eating certain foods and has to be careful. So in that dog, the gastrointestinal tract is not going to be an easy way for them to remove toxins. If they're successful, their body will resort to other mechanisms. Does that make sense?
Yep. Nope. And it was super interesting to me because there's so many things when you go through this process of learning how to look at healing and the process of the body differently, that when you explain that to me, all of a sudden I had this light bulb in my head go off with my youngest son. And he was, we sent him to public school for the first couple of years and then we homeschooled him. Well, of course, anybody who has kids that go to public school knows that they get sick a lot, especially when they're young. Like it's just part of it. But it did not matter what this kid, and he was sick every other week, I swear. He would come home with, it didn't matter if it was strep, it did not matter what he was sick with, he would get nauseous and throw up. And I just, and for all of his growing up, I was like, oh yeah, that's just, he just gets, he just throws up easy. No, now that concept makes so much sense to me. That was his body's way of like, get this out.
Right.
It didn't matter what it was. That was his pathway. And so right. It was such a kind of a helpful, I don't know, we just have those little things where it clicks, and that was something that was really helpful. But I just didn't realize that, that there's that individualized path of least resistance to get stuff out of the body. That makes sense. It just makes a lot of sense. And there is only so many ways for it to do it. So you're going to see, some dogs it's the ears, some dogs it's diarrhea, there is only so many ways. But when you start to recognize that, there's a path of least resistance that is common in this animal, which is why it's so helpful to get an understanding of their history and really get to know your patients, I'm sure, is that then you can be like, well, yeah, of course he's got diarrhea, but that's not necessarily the issue. The issue is coming from,
Right.
it could be coming from something completely different that caused the diarrhea before. It's just his body's way of getting it out. And so I think that's important for people to realize as a kind of a concept.
Right. So we think about the animal's body as like an entire unit,
Yeah.
even if there are different things going on in different parts of it. The goal is not to play the conventional game and give a different supplement in lieu of a different drug for each individual problem. The goal is to kind of figure out what is the underlying process and what support does that need? What support does that organ system require so that healing can come about as a result of enabling detoxification, but sometimes easing it because detoxification can suck.
It can be harsh, yeah.
And then strengthening the organs that require more support so that they also have an easier time doing their job. So that's what we're going to teach you how to do.
That's the goal, right?
Because it really is about doing that.
Yeah.
I think, as a practitioner, and, I have pets myself, my goal is always, I don't want to have my patients on 15 different supplements. I don't want to have a different supplement, homeopathic remedy, whatever, for every different part of the body. I want to streamline this so that we can have as many supplements that are doing like double or triple duty as possible.
Multi-purpose, yeah.
So that we're covering as much ground as possible and offering the broadest base of support as possible.
Well, I think this is a great segue into the next part, because it's like, well, we talk about that concept of, how the organ systems and, to support those that are showing that they need it. I think that is the next part of this process that is very different than the conventional approach, which is we don't go for a diagnosis to figure out what to give. And I think that's where the swapping conversation starts to become moot, because it's like you can't just swap, because you have to start with what you see. You're going for the symptoms. You're looking at the symptoms that are being presented and saying that's what needs the most support first, right? Is that kind of how you look at it?
Well, it's the difference between, like, in conventional medicine, I always think that the conventional doctors mistake the symptom for the disease.
Yes.
The ear infection is not the disease.
Right.
The anal glands are not the disease. They're telling you about a process that's going on inside the animal's body. That's the disease. And so it really is about addressing the root cause and trying to figure out, if my dog is having ear infections and having soft stools and chewing on his feet, why? What is the underlying reason why all this is happening? And again, typically it's going to be some combination of trying to detox something, immune system having some challenge with it, organ systems needing extra support in order to ease the process. And so that basically is like the background view of our animals that we use to help us decide what are we going to do about this issue.
So really the symptoms that your animal is presenting are used as a guide to figure out the illness, the disease, the imbalance. They're not the disease itself.
Exactly.
And I think that's the biggest difference. We're not looking at the ear infection saying, oh, the ear infection is the problem. The ear infection is the disease, quote unquote, right? That's not a disease. But the ear infection is a guide for us to use and address, to then use that as kind of a pathway to figure out what's the underlying cause. And so for me, it's been really helpful to think about it. Usually when you're dealing with a problem, there's kind of a layered process that happens. It's like you kind of start here, but you may not stay there. And you may start here and address, the detoxification process, because that's what you're seeing in the ears, and you might do something very specific to that, but then it kind of shifts a little bit, and then you might reevaluate and change what you're doing according to what the animal's body is showing you. And so the idea of symptoms not being the problem to fix, symptoms are a guide to fix the problem.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well said.
Thank you. I'm learning.
But that's also why, as the symptoms shift, treatments might shift, as we recognize that, oh, now this organ system seems to need more support, or in some cases, if symptoms shift in a certain way, maybe chiropractic would be helpful, or something like that. That's why it all plays into it. We're always looking at the whole animal and trying to treat what is actually going on with them, the real process of dis-ease in the body. So then that leads us to the basis of all this, which is understanding that healing itself is a process and not a magical moment.
Yep, there's a process to healing. And so again, you know, when we look at, you know, the whole purpose of this episode is to really kind of address what is the conventional perspective, because that's what we're all coming from and taught, to kind of trying to gain this new perspective. The healing takes time. And I think we as a society have forgotten that it takes time. The natural process of healing should not be rushed. We should support the system as best we can to get through the process, not stop the process, not stifle the process, not hurry the process. We're not forcing anything. The minute you try and take that approach, you're going to fight an uphill battle in one way or another. It might quiet the problem for a little bit, but it's going to either come back more, or it's going to come back in a different spot, or it may suppress for a while and then come back as something really nasty that you wouldn't necessarily relate, but it wasn't allowed to detoxify out of a certain pathway, and you stop that pathway, and so now it's just being stored in the body and it can't get out. And what problem are we having, right?
Exactly.
So the idea is that healing is a process, and to really try and remind ourselves, or even just stop and think maybe for the first time, this should not be a microwave solution to a problem. This is us, especially with chronic issues. I mean, any issues, we want to just support the body to do what it wants to do. But when you have chronic issues like most dog owners do, most animal pet owners, there's a chronic issue. It's not a one and done. There is a process to this, and you need to have we kind of coined these like 4 terms that are kind of the steps in the process. We actually outline this. There's a great diagram that I made in our free holistic intro care guide that you can get, and I'll link it below, that has these steps to these processes. And it's like, it takes a little while to really wrap your head around this. So the idea of the process of healing, it requires patience, first of all. We have to have patience and not be emotional, and realize that maybe the body is just trying to do what it's trying to do, and it's not something for us to stop. We need to be able to be unemotional and take into consideration what's happening in order to find the right course of action. Also knowing that we're respecting that there is a healing process, and so we don't want to just stop whatever it is. So that requires patience, and that's hard at first. When you're used to, here's a problem, here's your medication, stop the problem, and your animal is uncomfortable, it's hard to develop that patience.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. And that, I think, is a big challenge. And that's where sometimes I think, there's a lot of people where when their pet gets in a crisis, or when the issue that you've been dealing with comes back again, and you're very frustrated, there are some people who don't have the patience for the holistic approach.
Yeah.
And that's not a bad or good thing. It's just what it is. It innately requires some patience. You have to be, like you said, a little bit less emotional, a little bit more observational, a little bit distant, so that you can apply the treatment and then observe what happens afterwards. And you need to kind of get some clarity about that. And this is something, like, I was not taught this in vet school, certainly. This is something that you kind of develop and you get better at over time. So initially it might seem awkward, and sometimes you have to have a list of symptoms or a list of things you're looking at and kind of go through each one and check them off every day. So it might be a little bit clunky at first, but you do get better at it over time. So there's patience, there's the observational piece. And the observational piece too, I think it's important to realize that, whether your dog has or cat has something like an ear infection, a UTI, an itchy spot, a rash, in conventional medicine, these are thought of as acute problems. Everything was fine, then one day your dog developed an ear infection. This is what is called in homeopathic philosophy an acute flare-up of chronic disease. There is a chronic condition running along underneath the surface, and one day there's a symptom that you notice. Another way to think of it is that we were taught this in vet school. All chronic disease starts acutely. And what that means is, again, same thing. Things cook along underneath the surface. One day there's something that you notice. That's not when the issue started, unless it's something obvious like trauma, okay? But that's why we're trying to treat a process, not just this sudden manifestation, the ear infection. And so that's why when you're in your more clinical observational self, it's not just the ear, the ear, the ear. You have to look at the whole animal, because a lot of times what you'll see with humans through the process of homeopathic treatment, usually the first thing that happens and the first indication that things are going well is you feel better. You might still have your headache and your tooth pain and your diarrhea and your eczema, but you kind of feel better. And that is something that is difficult to define, and it's hard for us to know how our pets feel. And so that's where we need to kind of get a little bit quiet and observe.
So next up is the persistence piece. And this one, I mean, this for some people, they're just naturally persistent. I was not one of them. I had to learn to be persistent and stick with things. So what we mean when we say persistence is, you know, I am noticing this in my animal, and I'm going to try this homeopathic remedy that makes sense for what I'm seeing, and I'm going to support the immune system like this because I think this is the most helpful. And I'm going to, you know, I have my little protocol of 3 things that I'm going to do, and I give it a couple days, right? Or I give it a certain amount of time, and I'm like, okay, I've given it a little bit of time. It seems like it's getting worse. It's not even staying the same or getting, let alone getting better. It seems like it's getting worse. Okay, I need to like course correct. Let's go back. What am I seeing? Okay. And then I kind of have to go back and do again. And all of these things take effort, and they do take emotion. I mean, there is some emotional components to this at times, but it takes effort and it takes emotion. You have to be consistent and you have to pay attention. And sometimes you have to set timers for things. And, you know, it takes work. And when you kind of do a couple of different protocols and it's not, you're not quite there yet, you have to take a step back, reevaluate. We're going to try this time. That persistence is how you work through to a solution sometimes. Sometimes we get lucky first go. That's great when that happens.
Right.
But it's more often than not, it's going to take a couple of remedies to find the right one, or maybe a couple of supplements to help that support that body. And maybe I did help the body with those supplements the first couple days, but now it needs something a little bit different because we're in a different part of the process. Persistence is key. And then through that persistence, there's also kind of the carry out. It's like you kind of see the you finally, okay, I've got traction. I've landed somewhere. This is helping. This is working. But I'm not going to see a little bit of improvement and then stop everything I'm doing. I'm going to finish out maybe that whole bag of supplement, or I'm going to keep that remedy going for a couple more days because it's a lower potency. And so I know I can just kind of like, you know, finish it out. But that follow through, that carry out is that last 4th step of the process.
Yeah, and so it's kind of like you can't throw up your hands a day or 2 in and say, well, that didn't work.
And I've totally done that.
Oh, yeah. And sometimes you do need a change of a homeopathic remedy or a change in supplements, but you have to give things time, again, because healing is a process. So if you think about your body's always in the process of healing something. Cuts heal, fractures heal, old scars clear up and go away. You get over diseases, you get over infections.
But they all take time.
Exactly. It takes time. So you don't wake up the next day and think, oh gosh, my cut hasn't healed yet. What is happening? Like, you know, there's a whole process that is going on underneath the surface. So really what we're looking for sometimes are small incremental improvements, which again requires that little bit of observation.
Yeah.
So on the whole, we don't mean to make holistic medicine sound like, this huge challenge. And if you're not just the right kind of personality, maybe you shouldn't try this at home. But it is something that it's not just using different tools. Like now I'm going to change my dog's diet and I'm going to use supplements and remedies instead of the things I used to use. But it's also kind of learning a different way of thinking about health and disease. And that's really what we're trying to convey. It's not just the tools that are different, it's the whole approach and understanding that are different.
And I will say, at least for me and the people that I know that have gone through this process, like I didn't know you, I found you when you had already started, on this train of thought, but we all start there. We do start at the swap. That's where you start, because that's what makes sense.
Right.
But so we don't want to be discouraging to people that have switched to the raw diet, but they're not doing anything else. Good job. Like that is where you start. We're just trying to enlighten, bring to light, to say it a little bit better, that there's more to it than that. So yes, do those things. It's great to pick natural options. We want to minimize toxic load as much as we possibly can. And we do that with medicines, we do that with prevention, and we do that with food. Those are the heavy hitters. Swap those, absolutely. Just know that there's deeper to go with this to find more success, to head certain chronic things off at the pass if you deal with them differently on the front end with a different perspective and an appreciation for the healing process, and that it takes some time, it takes observation, it takes perseverance. So not to be discouraging at all, everybody has to start somewhere, and that's where I started, and that's where my close friends that are really into this now started, and it took us years to develop and hone this just different idea and different approach and different way of looking at it, and not being emotional and being all of that comes with time. And you get empowered and encouraged when you do some of these things and you see them work and you're like, oh my gosh, this thing actually healed up and didn't come back. It worked, right? So be encouraged that what you're doing is good. Just know that there's further to go if that's where you've stopped. There's more than just swapping, I think.
Yeah, and it depends on how hard your body has to work to deal with the problem. So sometimes there are more inputs that are required. I mean, I went down this path because I saw that over the course of a few years, my patients were not getting healthier as a result of my care. And for some odd reason, that's what I thought was supposed to happen. And so then I went looking for a different system of medicine where I could actually improve their health. And so this whole program is designed to kind of pass this knowledge on to you. And you have to start with the concepts, or else you're not going to understand what you're looking at or why certain recommendations might be made.
And we don't want people to get frustrated. I think that's another thing that happens is if you don't have maybe the right concepts and the right way of looking at it, you can try natural methods and get very frustrated because it's not working, nothing's happening, and then you regress and go back because you don't know what else to do.
Right.
I have a really good example of it was a puppy family of mine. This was from my first litter that they got a puppy from me, and I refer to her as my star student. I was brand new to holistic stuff, and I was very passionate about it, and I wanted every puppy family to do exactly what I told them to do. And she did, and she learned, and she listened, and she was phenomenal. And I have such a place in my heart for her because I needed one of those at that time. But what happened was, over the course of time, these dogs are now 7 years old. Over the course of time, she got away from the raw feeding, and she stuck with a holistic vet, which is wonderful, but she got away from the raw feeding. Well, then all of a sudden, her girl started having issues, and the licking and the open sores and all the stuff and things. And so she reached back out to me because I always told my puppy families, I'm always here, and now I do this. And so it's even more appropriate. And she reached back out to me, and I'm like, we have to go back. This is where we always start. Let's talk about the diet. And there was a lot that needed to be fixed there. And so I, made the protocol, and I'm like, this is what you need to do. It's going to take her a little bit of time for this to like take effect, but you know, this is the course of action. And so we put everything into place. She got the foods. She was doing homeopathic remedies as well. And what I found out later after I checked in with her was that through this course of, I think it had been maybe 4 or 5 weeks since I had checked in with her and we had started all of this, and I was like, here, this is everything you need to do. And she didn't really update me in between. So she updates me and told me how great she was doing, which was, I'm like, wonderful, right? It had only been 5 weeks. This is great. That's fast to me.
Right.
But during that time, and this is a holistically minded person, this dog got worse in the meantime. Okay. She said, I almost caved. I almost went in and I almost put her on Apoquil. I was so close. I was in tears, but she didn't. And she waited it out. And within a very short period of time after that, she saw this improvement, and now she's thriving and she's doing great. And what she said to me was, anybody else that you help with this, please tell them they're going to have patience. And so I really took that to heart, and I take that for granted now because I just do have patience. I'm like, well, of course, healing takes time. Not everybody understands that. And when your dog is miserable, it's really hard to hold tight to that. So just know that, you know, and it's funny because I'm like, your dog was having chronic issues and it was rectified in 5 weeks. That's pretty great.
Right.
Right? But we're used to a medicine stopping it. We're used to it fast, make the misery stop. Yeah. So that's my little tale of and I'm doing what she told me to do, which is to tell everybody to have patience. It will work. You just have to have patience.
Yeah. And maybe we're a little bit crazy because, you know, I get frustrated with my own pets as well, you know, if things aren't going the way I want. But I'm just steeped in this way of thinking about them. And there is always a way to help. And sometimes you just have to go back to the beginning, go through the symptoms again, observe to really detect, are things better, are things worse? And, you know, regroup and you kind of start over.
So hopefully that is kind of setting the stage a little bit, and maybe that was enlightening if you're kind of in between in this process of converting to holistic, or maybe you've done natural things for a little while, but it's been more of a swap situation, to just encourage you to dig a little bit deeper. You know, some of these resources that we've talked about, you know, the Beyond Flat Earth Medicine, it's the philosophy and the way he explains it was so helpful to me. And I've done this for a long time. It really just was helpful. It put everything into so much perspective. And one of the things that we really wanted to touch on as we finish, we'll touch on this and then we'll finish out, is Herring's Law of Cure. This was something that you mentioned that I'd never heard the term before. He does, Dr. Dooley does touch on it in Beyond Flat Earth Medicine. And now I'm using it in what I'm trying to help my dog through a chronic issue that showed up all of a sudden this year. Out of nowhere, she's 2.5 this year, and all of a sudden we have this itchy problem, and I'm like, nothing's changed. The diet's great. I know she hasn't had all these things. So now I'm having to dig really deep, and him explaining things with this concept is helping me to navigate that. So Dr. Levy, you were the one that gave it a name, and I was like, oh, and then I read about it, Herring's Law of Cure, which fits beautifully into homeopathy. Can you explain that?
And we're going to attach a video as well that also helps explain it in greater detail, although it's a really short video. So Constantine Herring was a homeopathic physician, originally from Germany, brought homeopathy to the New World. And through observation, he developed what are called the laws of cure. And so this is a way to observe how disease moves through your body. This is how you know, are things getting better or worse? And so the laws of cure is that disease moves from the upper part of the body where your head is and all your super important sense organs, down the body, and then eventually down the limbs. Disease moves from super important internal organs that we really want to keep running to the surface of the body, aka the skin, through the process of cure. So this is a good thing that is happening. Disease also moves. Sometimes you will experience old symptoms that you had before. They will reappear, usually in a milder form, but that is a common thing to see as animals and people are healing from their chronic issues. And so keeping those in mind, that's why when your holistic vet examines your dog, and let's say the dog had a scabby eruption that was all over the back of his neck, and you say, well, the back of his neck cleared up, but now it's in the middle of his back towards his tail, and your homeopathic vet says, good. That's why, because the disease is moving in the correct direction.
So now to use Gemma as an example. So Gemma is my one girl that I have now. My daughter also has her dog that lives here as well, but Gemma is literally my only dog, which is super weird. Super weird that I only have one dog. But Gemma is second generation naturally reared. And so I know everything that has ever been done with her. I bred her. I had her mom. She was first generationally reared. And I had her grandma. So I know her entire history. I know all of what has been done to her. There's no question on my mind. So I have a very good understanding of what has been done and what has not been done to this dog. And she's 2.5 years old. And then all of a sudden this warm season shows up and she flares up on her underbelly, on the inside of her legs with this crazy itchiness. She's red, she's pink, she's scratching her armpits to scabs. I'm like, what is going on? I have no idea. And this has been a process that I've had to go through. But what I will say, just as an example of this idea that you expect to see in the healing process, that it goes back to where it started. What I am watching for right now, it started on the inside of her legs and her underbelly, insanely itchy. Now we've gotten to a point where it's her neck. So now she scratched her neck raw. Now we've got it to a point where it's up to the side of her face and she scratched her jowl on her left side of her face raw. It's scabby. What I am waiting for at this point, because I think what I'm doing is working, and we'll talk about this whole process in another episode because I've done a lot of things, but what I'm watching for now is to start to see, I'm not expecting to just have everything clear up and go away.
Right.
I am expecting to see her face clear up, and then her neck clear up, and then her belly and her legs might get really irritated again. I am going to see that as progress, and I am going to see that as a good thing because it's like rewind. It's going back to how it started, and then eventually it will flush itself out. And I also kind of think of Herring's Law of Cure too, in that, like, you know, from up to down. Yeah. Right? And so that was what I really was confused about with this, is that it started down and it's working its way up. So tells me we're dealing with a deep situation. But that's just one example. I'm not looking for all of the redness, itchiness, and scabs to go all the way all at once, although that would be wonderful. I understand the process and know that it is much more likely that I am going to see the face clear up, then the neck clear up, then her belly's probably going to get a little angry again, maybe, and then it will hopefully subside and fade out, and we'll be done. That's my hope. But we'll see. Right,
but along the way, we've changed homeopathic remedies a couple of times. We added some supplements. We took some other stuff away. So
it's been a process, but I've really had to live out this process of being patient. That's for sure.
Right, but it's worth it because you could say too, like, well, how does this naturally reared dog develop all these issues? What does that mean? So of course, there's increased chemicalization of the air, food, and water, etc. Right. But this is. She's now detoxing chronic disease from previous generations.
That's really what we think is going on.
Because we've started, sure what's going on. The more that we see naturally reared dogs, it does seem that eventually one of the generations is going to start to detox previous crud, which is a good thing. You will end up with a much healthier dog overall.
And I did see some things, and you're aware of this, in her mom, in Evie. We've seen some things kind of trying to work their way out, and she's mostly fine, but she's had, like, there's been something that has tried, and so now it's like Gemma's the next layer of whatever, genetic kind of toxic baggage is there, and she's flushing it out, and we think we know where it's coming from. So I'm hoping we're on the tail end of this, because it's been months and months and months, but I think we're there. So update later.
Right.
We'll see.
Yeah.
But hopefully that gives you some good insight onto perspective on this, and then the next time we will kind of come back around and talk about what application could look like. What does the cost of this look like? It's not, a one and done with medication, but medications aren't necessarily one and done either, because you usually have to repeat them or do multiple, or, So we'll talk about that in the next episode. Any final thoughts, Dr. Levy?
Like, share, subscribe.
Like, share, subscribe,
And
share it with people. Yeah.
And comment.
Yeah.
So that's always helpful for us as well, to know if we're kind of getting the concepts across. I feel like this, for me also, it used to be a very foreign and new way of thinking about health and disease in my patients and in my pets. But the more I've worked with this philosophy in mind, again, in the conventional world, the doctor's job is to make your symptoms go away. In the holistic world, our job is to make our patients healthier. And those are two different goals.
Healing looks for progress, not a microwave solution.
Yep.
True healing is a process, and we look for progress. And sometimes that can look uncomfortable at times, but that doesn't mean it's not a good thing. And I think that's important.
Yep. We will talk about that.
All right. Till next time on the Crunchy Carnivore podcast, thanks for joining us. Thank you so much for joining us. Our goal is always to encourage others to seek out the holistic approach by way of education and empowerment. You can check out our online resources at wellspringhaa.com. You can follow us on our YouTube channel, Wellspring Holistic Animal Academy, and you can also find us on Instagram at wellspring_HAA. We hope that this has been helpful and that you continue with us on your journey to holistic health for your pets. As always, we're here to be unapologetically all natural.